Voorhees, the untold story of the horror icons and the man behind the mask, plus why fat comedians rule, published by the Hopecast Network. Chapter 2, Training Jason, Behind the Mask. The origins of Jason, understanding the legend. Jason Voorhees, the man, the legend, the hockey mask aficionado. When it comes to understanding the origins of Jason, we're diving deep into the murky waters of Camp Crystal Lake, a place so steeped in horror that it practically oozes fear like an overcooked steak. How do a seemingly innocent location transform into the murder capital of the world? Well, let me take you back. Way back to a time where mullets were fashionable, and the only thing raunchier than your uncle's jokes at a family barbecue was a movie theater popcorn during a slasher flick. Picture this, the 1970s, a wonderful decade filled with bell bottoms, disco, and movies that would later give me nightmares. Enter Victor Miller, the mastermind behind the original Friday the 13th. With a script that would make any serious writer cringe and popcorn loving teenagers clutching their seats, Victor immortalized Jason's story, complete with a dysfunctional family dynamic straight out of a B rated soap opera. I mean, who doesn't love a tragic backstory? You have a young boy who drowns at summer camp while the oblivious counselors are busy doing what counselors do best, making bad choices. Fast forward decades later, and we have our beloved Jason, who understandably has a few trust issues, to say the least. So after dear old Jason died, if you can call it that, you would think that would be the end of it, right? Wrong. Instead, he emerged from the depths like a maritime legend, probably because um, determined agent believed he had star potential. This was the moment when masks started to symbolize murder. Take Michael Myers. Loves the creepy William Shatner esque face mask. But Jason decided he needed something that screamed, I'm here to slice and dice. So naturally, he opted for the hockey mask, a unique fashion statement that says, I'm not just a killer, I'm also a sports fan. Who knew the NHL could inspire such chaos? Sorry, Gretzky. Now let's talk about how I got involved with Jason, the man himself. When I first became his trainer, I thought, what do I know about training a serial killer? But little did I know my background as a bike cop would provide invaluable experiences. Picture me chasing down runaway bikes, while in the back of my mind I was thinking, how do I turn Jason into a fitness icon? After all, if you're going to be jumping out at teenagers in the woods, you have to be in shape. I mean, a killer can have an aesthetic. So there I was, teaching Jason to leap, dodge, and throw a killer punch, literally. I tell him to visualize himself as a terrifying Goliath, but with a little more calorie consciousness. My training sessions often turned into monstrous giggles, with Jason awkwardly trying to show off his moves. Sure, it seems like the least fearsome killer exercise plan, but let's face it, half the time I was just trying not to laugh at the guy. Do you know how hard it is to maintain a straight face when you're watching a 6'5" block of muscle struggle to do cross-body shoulder stretches? It felt like a weird episode of America's Got Talent, except instead of singing, he was mastering the art of chasing unaware campers. Moreover, the community surrounding Jason is next level hilarious. I mean, let's get real. What's better than horror fans arguing over the best iteration of Jason or attempting fancy Halloween makeup tutorials inspired by, yes, a mass murderer? It's practically a subculture. Yet many were deeply invested in waxing poetic about how Jason paved the way for future horror icons. Because nothing says hero like a guy with a commitment issue and rage management problems. He's just misunderstood, they chant, as Jason wields his machete like a seasoned chef. But who doesn't love an underdog story? In sum, Understanding Jason's origins means recognizing not just the of terror, but also the absurdity behind it. As absurd as it sounds, Jason Voorhees represents a complex mix of tragedy, horror, and a dash of comedy, complete with a hockey mask that could put any Canadian team to shame. As I look back on my time training him, I can't help but chuckle as at the parallels between my own life and this famed killer. Who knew I could relate to a man who had made head chomping an art form? Sure, I may never win a Model of the Year award, but in the grand symphony of horror legends, I can at least say I played my part in helping Jason hunt down his groove. My first encounter with the hockey mask. The legendary hockey mask, a fashion statement that has become synonymous with horror itself. I remember my first encounter like it was yesterday. Not the first day of school or my first date, but the moment I laid eyes on the mask that would forever alter my perceptions of both killer and on contour. Picture it. I was preparing to take Jason out for a training session, and I, armed with my extensive bike cop knowledge and a dash of misplaced confidence, was about to become the handler of this unique graduate from the School of Slaughter. Initially, I thought, how hard could this be? I mean, it's just a mask, right? But there I was, standing in front of a mask store, which I swear was more ominous than a dentist office on a Monday morning. The sales rep, a lovely woman who resembled your typical horror movie enthusiast, might as well have been the keeper of forbidden knowledge. With an aurora that screamed, I've seen things. As I looked through the collection, my eyes finally landed on it. Jason's beloved hockey mask. The lighting shifted, and I heard angels singing harmoniously in the background. Okay, maybe just the faint echoes of horror movie themes, but same difference. Seriously, I was baffled. The mask had it all. It was stylish in its own grisly way, featuring a mix of white, black, and coordinated ventilation holes that screamed, I'm here for a killing spree, but I also care about my breathing. Perhaps it was because I spent too much time watching reality TV, but I couldn't help but marvel at how brilliantly this mask synthesized Jason's murderous intent with a touch of practical sportiness. I chuckled at the thought. Who knew that hockey could have such a dark twist? Perhaps even Wayne Gretzky wouldn't survive a game with this guy. The true adventure began when I decided it was only appropriate to try the mask on for size. Because why not? The saleswoman nodded approvingly as she had caught me in the normalization of madness. With the mask firmly positioned on my face, I could almost hear Jason's inner monologue telling me, You call that training? I didn't know whether to cower in fear or embrace it while shouting, I train Voorhees into the nearest mirror. Spoiler alert, I did not get any decent selfies that day. If I ever wanted to re enter society, I would have to remove it quickly. Once I finally wrenched the mask off, I had a moment of clarity, a revelation that this was not just about the aesthetic craftsmanship, but about the weight of a legacy it carried. The hockey mask became a character unto itself, representing everything from vengeance to an attitude of audacity, ready to face anyone brave or foolish enough to challenge it. And there I was, standing with a piece of history in hand, feeling like Indiana Jones discovering the Holy Grail, but with less treasure and, well, more blood. Later that day, while Jason arrived for our training session, he sauntered in wearing his signature mask while a grizzled celebrity on a red carpet. I hesitated, but my earlier enthusiasm resurfaced. It was time for a photo op. For posterity's sake, of course. Imagine my laughter as we positioned ourselves side by side, me holding his weapon of choice, while donning his unforgettable mask. Once misplaced bravado met Jason's cool-headed insanity, I realized we couldn't have stolen the show at a horror convention. If only we knew how to smile behind the mask. Fast forward several training sessions, and that mask stayed firmly planted in my mind. The more Jason wore it, the more intimidating he became. transforming into an entire mood, an aura that compelled everyone around us to ask, is that guy for real? It wasn't long before I understood the mass significance. It bridged the gap between everyday life and nightmares. Each one of Jason's kills was an Advent grade performance piece, and as his trainer, I was essentially guiding a tortured artist, a tour of fear. In retrospect, my first encounter with the hockey mask was not just a moment of hilarity, but a turning point in my life. It solidified my position in the world of horror training and confirmed that, even in training a monster, there's a playful side that's ripe for exploitation. As they say, commitment to the act is key, whether it's comedy or blood spillage. Little did I know, I'd end up being not just a trainer, but a true sidekick to a hapless legend, all thanks to the glorious mask. And so think to be a part of something so absurd. The training regimen, choreography of horror. The choreography of horror, an art form of delicate as a ballerina pirouetting atop a knife blade. As Jason's trainer, it became my sacred duty to sculpt his prowess into in the art of slaying while ensuring he moved with grace of a gazelle, albeit a gazelle with an insatiable thirst for blood. My approach to training Jason was rigorous, absurd, and at times comically chaotic. I often joked that we were creating the great horror ballet, and trust me, there are few things more bizarre than watching a hulking killer attempt to swan lake his way through a cabin. We started off with warm ups. Yes, that's right. Even a horror icon needs to limber up. There's nothing more reassuring than a massive masked figure meticulously stretching while I yell motivational phrases like, "You got this, champ." Remember, stretching is the key to a good slice. That's something inherently funny. There's something inherently funny about seeing Jason bend down to touch his toes, grunting like a dinosaur, as I offer careful encouragement. I often wondered if we were redefining the genre of fitness videos. Fitness for friends in horror. Get chased in style. Might just be the next big hit on YouTube. Next, next come the fundamentals of footwork. You can't just crash through the woods like a lumbering giant without some agility. So I kicked off, pun intended, each session with practice dashes and lunges, all while I wrapped a classic training montage from Rocky in my head. Surprisingly, despite his terrifying physique, Jason had rhythm. With each step and swipe of the machete, we created an intricate choreography that I like to call the dance of death. It was either a killer workout or seen straight from a terrible horror comedy. I had to remind myself that timing is everything. Timing, that is, if you want to scare someone and not slip on a fallen branch while yelling, "Boo!" In the midst of this madness, I introduced a series of drills that I hilariously named after classic horror films. The Texas Chainsaw Chase, where Jason had to chase me down a variety of barriers. The Halloween Hop, which emphasized silent stalking, an essential skill amidst unexpected campers. You'll never appreciate the fine art of creeping up on someone until you see a 6 foot 7 inch behemoth attempting to tiptoe. I truly felt I was directing a twisted Broadway audition. Jason, darling, you could dial back on the heavy breathing. We want to maintain an air of suspense, not frighten away the neighbors. You would think such a training session would have distinct moments of terror, but mostly they were a smorgasbord of absurdity punctuated by bursts of laughter. Take, for example, the cabin crawl, where I would deliberately pose as an unexpected victim, and Jason would hurl himself around the corner, arm arms raised like he was going for the Olympic gold in scaring homeowners. One day, during a rather boisterous reenactment, Jason stumbled awkwardly over some props I had strewn about, kicking a rubber chicken that extended from our decorative horror stockpile. Nothing makes you rethink your life choices quite like a masked killer sliding across the floor on rubberized poultry. Soon enough, We worked our way up to the piece de resistance, the final scare. Here is where the magic happened. The drill involved Jason being able to seamlessly transition from stealth to an all out macabre explosion of terror. I, of course, volunteered to play the victim. And let me tell you, the adrenaline rush of playing mortally terrified was unmatched. A gentle swoosh of fabric followed by a chill down my spine would have been inevitable in any horror flick. One time, I mistakenly shouted, "Go for the jugular!" And instead, Jason misunderstood and delivered a gentle tap on my shoulder. Talk about anticlimactic. Through trial and error, mostly the latter, we honed these methods into a sixth symphony of psychopathology and rhythm. Eventually, I saw that Jason's movements morphed from raw, erratic flailing into something resembling choreography. Perhaps this was the birth of a new genre, horror dance offs. Picture it. Contestants vie for the title of creepiest contortionist, where the audience votes just in case they want to be murdered, but with flair. By the end of our training journey, Jason's techniques had reached dizzying heights. He became an artistic representation of fright about to stab into a campfire sing along. His steps echoed tales of caution, don't go into the woods, and never run from the masked man. He gleamed with confidence as he lumbered towards campers in the scenic woods. After all, you'll never appreciate choreography quite the same once you've trained a horror icon. Who knew a business fashionably cloaked in fear could give rise to the most absurdly amusing collaborations of my lifetime? All thanks to a little bit of horror and a whole lot of scares. Psychology of a killer. What makes Jason tick? The age old question: what is it that makes a killer like Jason Voorhees tick? To be frank, piecing together the psychological profile of a man who has more stab wounds than friends is a job only slightly less daunting than trying to comprehend tax law. Yet here I was, diving into the intricate psyche of this iconic horror figure. In my early days, I approached this task like an aspiring therapist, but with all the professionalism of a stand-up comedian trying to squeeze laughs out of family dysfunction. Let's just say, exploring Jason's psyche often felt like climbing into the mind of a misunderstood artist who just so happens to use weapons for expression. First things first, we have to acknowledge that Jason's background is, let's just say, a veritable train wreck. We're talking parental neglect, drowning during his childhood, and all the sentiments attached to being the class outcast. It was as if someone took the worst parts of the Breakfast Club and decided to make a horror film instead. Seriously, when I sat down with Jason to discuss his childhood experiences, there was a heaviness in the air thicker than the humidity at a summer camp reunion. During that overly awkward therapy session, think back to high school guidance counselor vibes with more blood. I could have sworn I heard him mutter, "You just don't understand me, man." I had to remind myself that at the end of the day, this broken soul was the root of the horror that would soon be unleashed. Now here's where the fun really begins. The inner turmoil of a masked killer. Jason's desire for revenge is palpable, not unlike that one friend who steals fries off your plate every chance they get. And it dawned on me, Jason didn't just want vengeance. He aimed for loud and dramatic sentiments with each kill. Every swing of the machete was his way of expressing emotions most of us would rather keep bottled up. Like that time I stubbed my toe and hollered at the heavens. Think of it as an expressionist dance interpreted through dismemberment. This man's method of communicating feelings was certainly unconventional. But hey, who am I to judge a guy expressing pent up rage so creatively? Throughout our sessions, I found myself unraveling a complex emotional tapestry. Well, the irony. Here was a teenager who faced neglect but had found his way into the world of horror stardom, which his childhood bullies would never have seen coming. I had to hand it to him. He embodied the following life lessons, which I'd like to call the repressed rage rebellion. However, I had to keep reminders handy regarding proper outlets for expressing frustration. Think yoga or pottery, not machete wielding at summer camps. Yet there he was, illustrating life's tougher edges with mesmerizing strokes. And by strokes, I mean a swath of blood splattered chaos followed by a tagline that would put all copywriters to shame. But let's face it, you can't just create chaos without a sprinkle of charisma. Underneath that twisted exterior lay a surprisingly intriguing character. Jason had this nonchalant demeanor. The way he casually wielded the machete suggests a person comfortable in their own skin. I began to wonder if I had been doing him a disservice all along. Instead of focusing solely on sorrow, perhaps he was simply an introverted artist desperately seeking recognition on a much darker stage. Was he perhaps the brooding anti-hero we had all underestimated? In a disturbing way, Jason was probably quite relatable. After all, haven't we all wanted to scream bloody murder during an awkward family gathering? Moreover, this infamous icon had developed a reputation. He was the ultimate boogeyman. You can almost say that he thrived on fear and reputation, as if he were an up and coming stand up comedian who had resorted to wild card antics to get noticed. Each slash became a punchline in his twisted act, with the punchy timing of a sitcom, while I laughed nervously in the wings. Who knew that horror could be a comedic spectacle, too? Yet this trend of seeking validation through gruesome means only drew the curtain on the deeper issues at bay. Like every good horror story, behind each haunting mask lies a unique narrative begging to be uncovered. Now, between Jason's overdramatic tendencies and my ridiculous improvised counseling techniques, I must admit our moments together often turned oddly entertaining. We shared jokes that only would be understood, surrounded by the echoes of past fears. There were times I almost felt like Dr. Phil, if Dr. Phil wore a Hawaiian shirt and carried a rubber chicken in his back pocket, of course. Thus, my explorations into Jason's psyches represented more than just vicarious horror. They unlocked a glimpse into an enigmatic mind, filled with absurdities and comedies that intertwine darkly and profoundly. In conclusion, what truly made Jason tick wasn't solely revenge or madness, but rather a blend of trauma and charisma manifesting as a chilling drive to confront those ever present fears and insecurities. In my book, that made him more than just a faceless killer. It morphed him into a tragic anti hero, desperately seeking his moment to shine, albeit on a rather twisted stage. And here I was, assisting him in rehearsing for the role of a lifetime. All this time, I thought I was mentoring a killer, yet at times it felt like was just two absurd souls trying to navigate the murky waters of life, death, and hockey masks. What a way to spend those precious moments, huh? The influence of horror on pop culture. Horror, an evergreen topic that permeates our lives more than Aunt Edna's fruitcake at Christmas. The influence of horror on pop culture is undeniable as that uncomfortable silence that follows a bad punchline. From the blood-soaked landscapes of slasher films to the costume designs that sparked fathomable fear and sometimes hilarity, horror has weaved its sinister spell through the tapestry of culture in ways that makes us both shudder and chuckle. Let's start with the obvious. The sheer number of horror films produced over the years offers endless fodder to satiate the deepest cravings for scares. Just a casual stroll through Netflix can lead to a decision crisis between an existential crisis movie or the latest horrifying jaunt with the chainsaws. The irony lies in how horror filmmakers have managed to tap into human fears, Yet we find ourselves returning to these cinematic nightmares time and again. It's akin to driving past a car accident, both horrified and intrigued. How did this guy become a dismembered legend? You'll ponder. You'll ponder. Spoiler: it's usually a troublesome childhood mixed with some creative backyard projects. One cannot mention the horror genre without acknowledging its ability to influence fashion. I'm not merely talking about the latest vampire chic vibes that makes the stylish goth looks. Think about Jason's iconic hockey mask or Ghostface chilling visage. These expressions of terror have outlived their movies and morphed into true fashion statements. Seriously, who hasn't experienced a moment of envy towards the person casually wearing a horror icon shirt while you're rocking a basic tee? Oh, I like horror too, I screamed internally. Why haven't I gotten a theme wardrobe? I suppose you could say I just haven't done the deep psychological work necessary to channel my inner horror aficionado. But the magic doesn't just stop there. Horror was infiltrated our beloved marketing campaigns, especially around Halloween. Dare I say, we've witnessed a mini renaissance of spooky everything trends that arise once the leaves start to change. Haunted houses experience pop up like mushrooms, while retailers deck their halls with grotesque paraphernalia that would make even the bravest soul scream. Whether they like it or not, imagine haunted pumpkin spice lattes. The convergence of horror and consumerism pushed us into an annual frenzy that feels both delightful and confusing. While I'm buying a shirt that says eat, pray, scare, you may ask, and here's the kicker: it works. It's all about the thrill of deception, or at least dressing in a fox gruesome fashion while sipping wine. Comedians are another noteworthy vehicle for horror influences. Who knew that laughter and terror could share a summer campfire, roasting marshmallows together? Throughout my life, I've noticed countless comedians draw upon horror references in their routines, adding layers to the punchlines they resonate deeply with audiences. It's a masterful blend. One moment they're revealing a dark fear, and the next they're critiquing the absurdity of our reactions to it. I mean, how many times have I watched a comedian riff on a movie character while I snicker in a popcorn induced haze, hoping I'm not the next hapless victim? Here's a thought: you never truly appreciate a horror movie until a comedian analyzes it while attempting to craft their signature finish. It's like a life lesson wrapped in a punchline. Even social media platforms had inevitably succumbed to chilling embrace of horror. Nothing is more entertaining than scrolling through TikTok videos where creators dream up fantastical horror threesomes involving character mashups like Jason hosting a barbecue with Pennywise. Come for the meat, stay for the nightmares. If you ask me, we blurred the lines where memes, parodies, and genuine scare fest intermingle, creating captivating content, the like of which we never knew we needed. Oh, the digital age. What a time to be alive. Moreover, horror has instigated profound discussions about societal fears, addressing issues we often tread lightly around. Beyond just mindless gore fest, many modern horror flicks strive to convey messages that challenges the status quo. Whether it's the critique of cultural behaviors or the exploitation of existential dread, horror has the ability to bring these topics to light in compelling ways that stay with us long after the credits roll. Perhaps that's the greatest irony of horror. It can instigate fear and camaraderie simultaneously. While screaming at the television, we develop an unspoken bond among friends gathered to survive the experience together, united in absurdity. In summation, the influence of horror in pop culture is as inescapable as your favorite reruns during a binge watching session. From fashion victims to comedy sketches, horror has challenged us in unique ways while entertaining our twisted curiosities. Who knew diving into the world of slasher films would inform not only our wardrobe but also reignite my dreams of being a therapist slash comedian? Ultimately, whether we laugh or scream, our truth remains steadfast. Horror will forever hold a playful grip on our consciousness, lurking behind our favorite entertainment like an eager fan, waiting to claw its way into pop culture history. Cheers to the nightmares that inspire laughter. May they keep us cherished and horrified. Behind the scenes, my role in shaping fear. Behind every great horror icon lies a bizarre tale, a story laced with comedic undertones and unexpressed twist of fate. As I carved out my role in this world of masked mayhem and blood soaked fantasies, I often find myself thinking about how I, MTD, was undeniably a fear shaper, molding Jason's presence while pondering my existential dread. After all, somebody had to guide him through his chaotic transitions from unstoppable killer to burgeoning horror legend. Who better than the guy who once directed traffic as a bike cop? Imagine me rolling up my sleeves and putting on my profitable director's hat, a 90s trucker cap featuring a horrifying patch emblazoned with not just a trainer. My days were often spent navigating the peculiar politics of training buckets of angst topped with my own wild imaginations. Often, as I guided Jason, I've wondered, am I creating a monster or restorative art? Nothing makes you question your life choices quite like coercing a towering figure into executing graceful machete swings while advising him on how to strike a pose. I can be the Michelangelo of horror, crafting moments of chaos like they're part of a delicate dance choreography, or not to put too fine of a point on it, an absurd romp through horror conventions. It was a peculiar sensation, assuming the role that seemed to straddle the line between madness and theoretics. As Jason whipped across the training ground, wielding his machete like a paintbrush dipped in crimson paint, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction bloom in my chest. My mission was to bridge the gap between his willingness to terrorize the innocent and the effective performances he needed to instill terror. Moments became choreographed beats of horror, creating an emotional dance where every slice influenced the landscape of fear. I often joked that we were the Blood Brothers, but when it came down to it, those rehearsals had transformed into bizarrely touching moments of camaraderie. Shoot days were also a whirlwind, like a circus with clowns who were secretly horror fanatics. My role became even more pronounced behind the scenes, where brainstorming kill scenarios with a team of groveling writers felt like a hipster coffee shop with chainsaws. Picture me feverishly flipping through notes, formulating wild ideas about how Jason could put a new spin on classic kills, all the while trying not to laugh at how outlandish my suggestions might seem. What if he did a power slide through the cabin door? Might have sounded brilliant at the time. Though looking back, I can't help but chuckle at our newfound absurdity. As I crafted these pivotal moments, I had to keep in mind the shaping fear is not just about blood and guts. It's about establishing an emotional connection with the audience. You have to cultivate the cocktail of dread and fascination while leaving viewers wide eyed and breathless, clutching their popcorn in manic disbelief. The dance between connecting with emotions and including fears lies at the core of any great horror tale. Watching young audiences scream in terror while cackling in disbelief is what it's all about. I sometimes felt like an evil wizard orchestrating the choreography of fear. No capes or broomsticks required. One unforgettable day, we found ourselves shooting a scene where Jason was faced with an unexpected enemy, a squirrel. As we set up cameras around the woodsy area laden with fake blood and fake tension, I felt the chaos unfold as Jason cautiously approached the furry creature. I bowed my head in mock seriousness, pondering what kind of landmark it would be, trying to showcase a primal fear for future generations. Fear the squirrel. the fury nemesis of Jason Voorhees, ultimately became quite a laugh between us all. Misadventures that became etched into our shared horror history. Apparently, the underbelly of chaos often breeds fabulous memes waiting to happen. It is essential to note that my shaping of fear wasn't solely about scenes and movements. It's also extended to honing the voice of Jason himself. As absurd as it sounds, we developed a way to channel his rolling emotions into eerie sounds, guttural whispers, and even the faintest of groans. We experimented, for example, with motivational phrases for Jason to recite in key horror moments, whether screaming, "I'm not just a killer, I'm an artist," or "That isn't just a slice, it's a critique of society." Each moment carried merit. Fear and humor were colliding on the battlefield, creating a new energy that reflected the advent of laundry folding fear. In conclusion, my role in shaping fear behind the scene was an enchanting whirlwind of obscurities that left me questioning just how much of a participant I truly was in this twisted art form. The interplay of laughter and dread infused every experience with a unique flavor, allowing me to contribute to the legacy of horror alongside my formidable pupil. Together, we created a comedic symphony of madness that would echo through the ages. Jason Voorhees casting shadows while I held my inflatable rubber chicken, weary yet ready to shape the next haunting chapter. Now that's a show worth watching. The Hopecast Network has reached out to MTD several times for questioning about these events. MTD's whereabouts are still unknown at this time.